Welcome back to Walter's War Wagons. Today we're putting together a spool type directional control valve according to International Harvester, or a steering mechanism power steering pilot valve case according to Case International. This is from a J10 or J15 type steering system, hydraulic steering, and in his hand he has the standby one. It's not listed on the part. That's a cam that goes into the pilot valve, and it's fairly difficult to get in. As you can imagine, it's a very tight fit, so the hydraulic fluid can't leak between it and the body. There are no O-rings in it, and the way they're designed is they have a bevel on the edges of some of the cams that allows the fluid to enter the chamber first at a very low volume, and then when the cam moves to the next valve position, the transmit or the hydraulic fluid enters at full volume. And he just used a ball peen hammer to tap it in because we don't have a plastic hammer on our workbench here. He's putting on the end cap. That end cap's the lower end cap, goes on the bottom of the unit. There he's putting the end cap seal in. You're going to lube it up first. Again, use plenty of lube when you're working on these so you don't start them out dry. Granted, some hydraulic fluid will get into it fairly quick, but it'll start off dry. 2 mounting bolts he just pulled out. And we replaced all of the O-rings on all of the fittings prior to assembly. Even though they didn't need it, there was no leaks on it. Anytime you take a hydraulic part, you need to replace the O-rings. We're not doing this from a kit, so I don't have a part number for you for a kit to rebuild these parts. And the last video we did was a pilot valve, or divider valve, I'm sorry, a divider valve that bolts on a plate with this pilot valve, and then the hoses go from the pilot valve up to the steering wheel and then down to the front steering ram. We don't have anything giving us torque specs on this. They're just TIT tight. That was the bottom end. Now it'll fix the top end. And the spring on the top of there is the spring that gives the valve its action. So when you turn the steering wheel, it forces fluid into one side and it compresses the spring, and when you turn it the other way, it takes away the pressure. And this is the top end. needs to be tapped down a little bit further. That sounded like it hit the bottom. The third video in this series will be on the steering hand pump. That'll complete all of the steering valves and pumps. We didn't show a video on the rebuilding the power steering ram, and we had that rebuilt by a company here in town, and they had the parts to do it. We couldn't find the parts, so we just had them do it. It was reasonably priced, but it cost a whole lot more than to have us do it ourselves, so we haven't done that again. Okay, and then the next is there's a little ball bearing, and there's a plug cap. The part is called a plug International Harvester Assembly, part number 379901R91, and it says there's a check valve. It's a check valve. That little ball bearing goes in there and sits in a little depression in the bottom of that, where that fitting or that cap screws on. And when you take that apart, make sure you catch that ball bearing. It was a surprise to us. We didn't even know it was there, and Pop picked up a paper towel and it fell out onto the floor, and then we had to figure out where it came from. And then we found our parts list, and it came from the hole we suspected it did. Sorry about the wobbly picture. I don't have a tripod. Not in here. I don't know where I put it. Okay, now he's putting in the plug. It's IH 9410357, and that's a bleeder valve. So when you put the parts on the tractor, you can loosen that valve up and watch for fluid to come out of it, and then tighten it back up, and then go down by the steering ram and loosen the connections down there until you see fluid coming. Then you should be able to operate the steering, and it'll clean the rest of the air bubbles out on its own. And there we have the part completely assembled. The only other two parts there are hose connectors, and we can show you how that hooks up with the other part. Yeah, grab the part out of there, would you? Okay, that's the divider valve that we did on the last video, and I'm going to set that one flat on the table, the divider valve. And then you see the surface right there is machined flat, and the surface there is machined flat. That'll sit on top of the divider valve here on our table. And then the mounting bolts pass through the divider valve to the mounting plate under the steering wheel on the tractor itself. So that will actually sit upright in the tractor. That's how the completed unit will go into the tractor. So thanks for joining us on this adventure, and again, the next video is going to be the steering hand pump itself. I'm not going to videotape me priming and painting these parts. I will tell you though that I have, you can't really see it there, Rust-Oleum self-etching primer is what I use. And then I have Van Sickle flat yellow primer. I don't care much for that. I'll use it on parts that we don't need to etch. And then there's Van Sickle Tractor Equipment Industrial Enamel, and it's what we're using is Gloss New Cat Yellow number 468-70. It's pretty good paint. I like to buy it in spray rattle cans because it's easy to touch up what I screw up. Thanks for joining us. Come back to see video number 3 of the steering hand pump.